Marketing Your Private Practice is a podcast where you'll learn easy to implement tips and strategies to grow your business without spending all day online. I'm your host, Kathy Colaiacovo, and I teach practitioners the Thrive marketing method to create simple and streamlined plans by focusing on long-term strategies, not just social media. Discover ways to spend less time on your marketing, attract more clients, and build the financial freedom that comes with a thriving practice. One where you have time left in your day for the people and things that matter to you. Hey, private practice heroes. I'm so glad you tuned into this episode today. I'm your host, Kathy Colaiacovo, and if you've ever attended an event or spoken at an event or even taken part in an event, maybe with a sponsor table or an exhibitor booth, and you felt like it was maybe a mistake going or a waste of time or even worse, a waste of money, or maybe you wondered why you even went there in the first place. Well, the lessons I want to share with you today will keep you from ever having that feeling again. I want to make sure you understand how you can go to events and conferences, no matter what role you're in, and get the most ROI on your investment in your time, your energy, and your money attending those events. And it's really important to make sure that these events do pay off. We're business owners. We have a responsibility to the bottom line in our business. And I personally have experienced some phenomenal events. I've talked before, we talked about some of this in our last episode about what you should be doing before you go to events. Well, now we're going to talk a little bit more and get into more about getting some of that actual ROI and learning and understanding how you can get more contacts, more leads, and more clients when you're going to these events and conferences. And I want to be really clear about this. These strategies apply to even local networking events, online virtual events, those coffee talks that you go to. Anything like that is considered an event in my mind. It's a networking event. Maybe it's a small networking event locally. Maybe it's a big conference you're going to. Whatever it is, these are events and they're part of doing business. And we want to make sure we're getting the most out of them as possible. So for me, my best event ever is a conference I went back to in 2009. Now, I talked a little bit about this event on last week's episode because that event to this day is bringing me ROI. I'm at over $775,000 and counting. Now, not every event I go to sees results like this, but there are other ones that have had some memorable ROI for sure. There was a time I flew to an event in Atlanta that my client was hosting. I went there on my own dime, and I actually sponsored a booth. I was also doing her social media live from the conference, but it was a dual kind of event that I was at. My ROI on that one, well, let's start with this. The investment in attending. I paid $3,000 for the table, about $2,000 for the flight and hotel, and I was away from my business for 5 days. Because I planned all the activities I would do at the event, I was ready at my booth, and one of my goals was to get 50 leads at the event. My sponsor booth pre-planning paid off. I signed up 128 leads from the people at the event. I did a giveaway. Now, the giveaway I did get a lot of interest, and I talked to a lot more people than I expected to, way more than I ever imagined, took part in my giveaway, which was not a giveaway of anything costly and literally took me minutes for each person. And I'm going to share more about that specifically in next week's episode when I talk about what you can do when you're sponsoring an event. But I want you to understand how ROI can come back here. So that particular event, I made $3,500 in sales before I even went home. And over the next 3 months, those contacts and leads from the event brought in 4 new clients. And those clients over time brought in revenue of more than $41,000 over the course of 3 years. Some of the contacts I met there turned into referrals of future clients, 3 to be exact. And those 3 clients brought in some revenue of $2,800. One of the original clients that ended up being one that had me then attend an event of theirs 2 years later in 2014. That event was a gala fundraiser, and it was in Los Angeles, California. So I flew there to do their social media live from the event, paid my own ticket. They paid for my hotel room. I was gone for 5 days because, of course, I added some time in to do some touring. And that was an amazing event. I did not make any money from that event other than what I made from my client. I did get some referrals later on that led to other things. But what I did get there was I got to meet some amazing people and some movie stars and music stars. I got a picture with Malcolm Jamal Warner. I met singers Marilyn McCoo and Billy Davis Jr. I met John Snyder from the original Dukes of Hazzard. And I even met and talked with Joe Lake, who is one of the men behind the famous Children's Miracle Network telethon. It was an amazing event in itself, and it all came from planning my actions at an event 2 years before that brought me all these new leads and clients, and ultimately led to me saying yes to another client when they asked me to come and do some marketing on the other side of the country, again, on my dime. But it all paid off. One of the contacts I met there ultimately led to a relationship in the future, and it just kind of goes on and on. All told, that one event back in 2012 led to almost $48,000 in revenue from an investment I put in originally of about $5,000. Plus, I had an evening in LA at a gala, dressed up in a gown. I was wearing a gown, and meeting stars from TV, movie, and music. Now, the reason I can tell you all these numbers is because I practice what I preach, and I track the ROI of these events, and I do the setting of the goals and planning the actions. The 3 things we talked about in episode 103. And these are all things you need to have done ahead of time, not when you land at the event, because in most cases, that will be too late. Tracking your ROI, planning your actions, setting the goals for any type of event or conference, these are all important things to do, especially the planning of the actions. And that's what we're going to focus on today's episode, is looking at what actions should you be doing and planning for. And I know my story sounds a little exceptional, but it really isn't. There are many people who've experienced similar results from events too. But the thing I've found in common is when they talk about how it all happened, it's that they also focused on these 3 activities. And one of the bigger ones that they focus on is planning their actions, because those actions are the ones that made the biggest difference in the ROI they experienced. And to be very clear on something, whether you pay to attend the event or not, you have an investment in going to an event. So even a free networking event locally is worth something to you. And it's important that you pay attention, plan your actions, set the goals, and track the ROI. Or, well, we'll keep them in order. 1, 2, 3, setting goals, planning actions, and tracking the ROI. But the planning of the actions is really important, because most of the time we are going to events, if we're not going to learn, and sometimes we are going to learn new skills. But in any case, even if that is the main focus, we're still always thinking about making those contacts, making leads, and even making clients or sales. So on episode 103, I talked about a little bit about the inspiration for these lessons on events and conferences. And it started with one of my Academy members, Alexis, who is a paper artist. She's a talent behind a company called Designs by Lex. She's here in Nova Scotia, and she had some awesome marketing results, amazing results from a show where she was an exhibitor. She went there, she was selling her art pieces at her booth. And you can find her, by the way, at designsbylex.com online. And I'll put a link to her website and some of the pieces she makes, and a recent one that she's done for me. You'll find that on the show notes page at marketingyourprivatepractice.com/104. One of the strategies I shared with her was a way to plan her actions as a exhibitor, as someone who had a table at this event. She followed it to a T, and that's where she had these amazing results. And that is what happens when you take the time to plan your actions that you're going to do at an event before you ever get there. And again, actions like this are actions you're going to do whether you're attending, speaking, or having a booth or a table at an event like Alexis did. There are several strategies I want to share with you that you can do so that as you're planning these actions, you can make sure that you're making the contacts and getting the leads at your next event or conference. Because typically those leads and contacts are going to have a certain percentage turn into clients, but it won't happen if you don't plan your actions and ensure that the activity you're doing at the event helps you get those contacts or leads, the goals that you're setting typically. So, what we're going to talk about today in this episode is the actions you should be doing when you're attending a conference or an event as a participant. Because the actions you will do if you're speaking at an event or if you're sponsoring an event or have a table like Alexis did, they're going to be a little bit different. And we're going to cover those in the next episode. There's a lot involved in these, and I couldn't get them in time without having a 90-minute long episode, and I didn't want to do that. So this is what we're going to look at doing here, is covering the actions you're going to do as a participant at an event. The goal here is by doing these actions and planning them ahead of time, it's going to help you get as much ROI as possible. The first action that we're going to talk about is for everybody. We talked about it in the last episode. You've got to set those goals. You've got to have some clear objectives for going to the event, whether it's the number of connections you want to make, the leads, how many people you want to talk to, what you want to learn, the sales you want to make. You need to think about those and write them down and make them real. The actions we're going to plan for are going to help you achieve those goals. The ones I'm going to talk about today are going to focus on specifically making connections, contacts, and leads, because most of the time as a participant at an event, that's what's available for you. It's challenging to do certain other things you would do as a speaker or a sponsor when you're an attendee who's part of the crowd at an event. You can't be out there doing some things that somebody would do on stage, for instance. So we're going to look at 10 event marketing strategies for attending an event or a conference. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to make sure you bring some business cards. You need to have business cards on hand. Even if some of the QR codes or the digital cards are popular, I always say take some paper cards, ones you can actually give to people in hand. They're going to be looking for it. Not everybody is going to be as technically savvy as everybody else. So always make sure you have some current business cards on hand to give to people when you run into them and you're having a conversation and you want to exchange information. I also say, as an attendee, you could consider having some extra flyers or promotional materials that might be relevant to the audience that is going to be there. And that is a key thing here, is you have to be careful about, just being that person going around trying to sell your stuff when you're supposed to be at the event, learning or networking or participating. So be cautious on that. And that actually leads me into number 2, which is understand the audience who is there. So you want to know who's going to be there at the event so that you know who you could be connecting with. You know what you might have to take with you. If you're looking at having a flyer or bringing something with you with a special offer on it, you want to know who's going to be in the audience. So you want to make sure you're doing a little research of who's attending, who's going to be there, and think about how you can connect with these folks. You want to tailor your conversations and your pitches to the interests and needs of the people that are there. So you want to make sure that you're coming in and talking to the right group. The other thing I like to make sure you're doing is practicing and preparing your elevator pitch. So this is number 3 here. You want to ensure that you are really comfortable introducing yourself, introducing your business, and being really clear about it. I like to make sure I practice, and I also typically have multiple versions of my elevator pitch that's tailored to different audiences. So when you know who's going to be there, you might be able to talk about an ideal client in a way that hits home better with folks that are there because you know what kind of person is attending. Then I like to make sure that you are focused on making some meaningful connections. So when you're here, I don't want you to be out there throwing around business cards and just giving them to people and aggressive selling, I might call it. I want you to focus on building genuine relationships. I want you to engage in conversations, listen to other people, share what you do, listen to what they do, talk about what makes a good referral or good connections. I remember an event that I went to in late 2023. there was a fellow there, and he literally, I'm not kidding you, he literally walked around and he was taking his business card and putting it in people's hands. Like, he walked to a table and held his business card out for everybody to take. I personally took it and just threw it on the table. I was kind of upset about how aggressive he was, and it just was not comfortable. And you don't want to be that person, because I walk away. I have a very different opinion of him now that I've seen him do that, and it didn't fly with me, and it leaves a bad impression. And you don't want to be leaving a bad impression. And this is why I say you want to make sure that you avoid in your connections being overly salesy, which is one of the other steps here that we want to look at here. You want to plan not to be the person who's trying to sell to everyone at the event, because you want to leave a positive impression on people rather than an icky feeling, which is exactly what I got with this fellow. You want to come to these events and be prepared to network and talk to people. So you want to be ready to engage with people, ask questions, share insights, show interest in others, look for ways that maybe you could do some collaboration or joint ventures. So be ready to connect and talk with people. You want to make sure that you're engaging and connecting and networking, which, as an attendee, that's the main goal that you would have there and the role that you're going to have at this event. Which takes me also to, you could be doing some networking ahead of time on social media. You can be engaging with the event planners, the company, the group, the corporation on social media. You could find hashtags out there to follow that people are using. You could find yourself connecting with other attendees online before even showing up there. I've done this a lot, and by the time you get there, you already have a connection with people, and you're just waiting to meet them in person, especially if we're talking about an in-person event. So networking with social media can help you as well. Then I want to make sure that you're staying engaged throughout the event. You do not want to be the person sitting in a corner on their phone, not paying attention to anybody. I can promise you, if you're that person who's at an event and doesn't partake, doesn't participate, who isn't going to sessions, you're in the back, not talking to anybody, or even sitting there right at the same table as people and not talking to people, and just literally being on your phone and ignoring everyone, people remember that too. And you don't want to be remembered that way. You want to be remembered as someone who is enthusiastic about being there. You're interested in the event and the activities. You want to approach this with a mindset of learning and growth and making connections. That's what being at an event as a participant is all about. Attend the workshops, attend the sessions, learn those new skills or knowledge. Some of those skills or knowledge are what I have used to track back that ROI. Because I learned new skills, I took it to my business, I offered more services, and I made money doing that. If I wasn't engaged throughout the event and learning, I wouldn't have had that ability to do that. So you want to be active in all of your activities and networking opportunities and participation at the event. The other thing that you want to do is sometimes take notes. You want to keep track of those important conversations and insights. Now, those QR codes like Blink and other ones that you can use as online business cards, digital business cards, can help you do this. But if you're not doing that, make sure you have some sort of notebook to write down or put things on a business card if you get one from somebody. Try to remember what you have, because that's going to help you later on. And as you give out these business cards and you're taking notes and planning some follow-up actions, you could also be collecting leads. So that's another action that you could be doing here. You could be making sure that if you have a lead magnet or something, so maybe you brought that flyer I was talking about earlier, and you have a way for people to follow up with you to get your freebie, if it's something that would interest them, you may want to make sure that you're putting that offer out there so that you're actually getting leads on your email marketing list and getting people to contact you that way. It's a little trickier to do this as a participant at an event, because you really want to be seen as networking and connecting versus selling. But I still feel like there's oftentimes ways that if you're having a conversation and you have an ebook that might help somebody, you can definitely be sharing that information. And that would be where you want to think back to one of the first steps here, which is your business cards. Maybe your business card should not have your homepage on it, but have that page for the lead magnet. And then you could just point it out to people on the business card. So there are still ways you can get leads at an event like that. The last thing that I want to say that you want to do here is you want to take the time to follow up. After the event, you want to make sure you're connecting with the people you met. You might be using LinkedIn, email, making a phone call. You might even be arranging an in-person coffee meeting, whatever it is. Take the time to follow up with the people that you did meet. Now, I know we're going to meet some duds once in a while that we're going to take the business card, kind of like I did that day, and not even take it home, and that's fine. But for the most part, it's common courtesy when you're networking to make sure that you are actually following up with that kind of thing. And that's it. Those are the different actions and steps that you want to take when you're attending an event to make sure you get the best possible ROI out of it. A bonus tip I'll give you, if you're nervous about going on your own, find a friend to go with, connect with them. Sometimes these events offer a very easy way for you to get a 2-for-1 deal. So you could share the cost. So look for things like that, especially if that will make you more comfortable being at the event. The idea is here, plan what you're going to do before you go there so that you get the most ROI out of that time away. So those are all the different actions and steps that you want to take and plan to do before, at, and after these events that you're going to. Whether you're going to a big conference out of your home state or province, whether you're going to a local networking event, your purpose for going, you have these goals. You want to achieve those goals. You've got to make some action plans to make sure that you do achieve those goals, especially if you're looking to get some ROI out of attending these events. Now, in the next episode, I'm going to cover the strategies for marketing and networking when you're sponsoring a table at an event, or if you have a exhibitor table at an event or a show or a conference, whatever it might be. So sponsoring, exhibiting, they're very similar. And the reason I've split this episode up, originally my plan was, to be honest, give you everything all at once, but there's so much different about each one of these. I wanted to make sure you got complete information on what you could be doing as a speaker, as a sponsor, an exhibitor, and what we talked about today, an attendee. And keep in mind, you don't have to be a speaker keynote making 5 figures to be smart about speaking at events. You could be speaking at a local event where maybe you're doing a 10-minute talk within front of your networking group. Anytime you put into events, conferences, trade shows, whatever it might be, you want to make sure you're being smart about it and getting that ROI. I want to hear some of your success stories, like the ones I've shared with you and the ones my clients are experiencing as well. I will put a recap of these 10 event marketing strategies for attendees in the show notes, so you can definitely look for that list, even print it out, to help you make sure you plan to do all of this the next time you go to an event. So wherever you're listening to the podcast today, just look below. There will be a link to marketingyourprivatepractice.com/104. You can just type that in your browser, click the link, and make sure that you follow up with these action steps that you want to do when you're attending an event. Now, what should you do as an action for today? I want you to be sure you go look at that show notes page, pull that list out, and before you go to your next conference, your next event, your next networking event, plan for that success and those actions before you leave. In fact, pull that list out the day you register and start making a list and a plan right then. Plan your goals, plan your actions, and then we'll definitely be tracking that ROI. And I will be sharing how I do that in a future episode as well. The goal is having that list of action steps. Make sure that the activity, the actions, the networking, the time you do, the time you spend here is worthwhile. So stay tuned for the next episode. We'll be sharing some more strategies for events, conferences, for speaking and sponsoring them. And I cannot wait to tell you about one of my past clients and what they did to stand out at a conference they were at. It was an HR conference, and they had a booth there, and it was pretty crazy what they did, but it also made them stand out, and everybody took notice of their booth. So I definitely want to share that story with you. So that's it for today, folks. This is Kathy Colaiacovo signing off, saying thanks again for tuning in and listening to the advice, the marketing tips and strategies I have for you. I hope they help you. I'm always open to feedback on the podcast or ideas for new podcast topics. So definitely reach out. There's a way on some of the sites that you're listening to, some of those apps, that you can just click a button and send me a text message. You can always reach me off my website, though, and send me a message about what you need help with, what you'd like to hear on the podcast. And remember, as we leave here today, if you want to thrive in practice or business and you're going to invest some time, money, and energy in events, make sure you take the time to set your goals, plan your actions, and track your ROI. That way you'll know if it was worth it or not. I'll see you next time. You can find all of our show notes and resources mentioned at marketingyourprivatepractice.com. Be sure to connect with me on Instagram at pepperitmarketing and say hi. I'd love to hear any feedback you have, and make sure to rate and review the podcast and hit subscribe on your favorite player so you don't miss any future episodes.